Hello everyone, it's great to have you with us this evening. I'm Karen Tate, I'll be your host for the next hour. I'm a freelance journalist and editor. For the past 20 odd years I've been editing French property news, and I also contribute to titles such as the Sunday Times. I'm joined tonight by our expert panel, and they'll be able to advise you on all aspects of moving to France or buying a property there. We've already received a whole load of questions from you, so thanks for that. If you have any questions during the webinar, there should be a box to the right where you can type in your question, and we shall try to get to all questions. If we don't, we'll follow up after the webinar. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So Joanna, would you like to go first?
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks for coming along this evening. I'm Joanna Leggett, so I'm one of the Leggett family. We're a family business. We've been established since 1998 in France. We've got about 650 agents that cover all areas of France, so we offer a really good hand-holding service. We can offer advice on buying and selling property in France, and we all live and work there. We're also multinationals, so we are some English, some French, Americans, Australians. We have a huge amount of different nationalities in our agents and also for our clients. So we're here to help. We have a great website and a digital magazine if you haven't got a printed one. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions tonight.
Lovely, thanks Joanna. Over to Tracy now.
Hi, good evening everybody. Tracy Leonetti. I'm your relocation expert based in the south of France for the last 30 years. And it's my job and that of the team at LBS to help you with your relocation to France from a paperwork perspective. So our job is really to make that transition smoother by helping with your visas, healthcare, driving license, car registrations, and anything that is causing you a problem for that relocation. So hopefully we can get some answers to you tonight, and if not, reach out to us afterwards.
Thanks, Tracy, and hello to Sharon.
Hi, Karen. Hello, everybody. I'm Sharon Rebel. I'm a French mortgage broker. I look after the international mortgage team at CAFP. CAFP are a nationwide broker with 53 years experience. I myself have been a broker for the last 20 years in France, and we deal with all types of French mortgages, French property finance for residents, non-residents, expats. So hopefully tonight I'll be able to answer some of your mortgage related questions.
That's great, thanks Sharon. And let's meet Paulette.
Hi, I'm Paulette Booth, co-founder and manager of Agence AXA International. We're a specialist AXA agency for English speakers in France. We can provide assistance for all insurances like home insurance, car insurance. A main thing for moving to France is health insurance is a hot topic, but also AXA Bank, which doesn't exist in the UK, but AXA Bank is one of the largest online banks in France as well. So we can help with all insurance and banking needs from an English-speaking team. Again, like Joanna, lots of different nationalities. We've even got a native Spanish speaker.
That's great. Thanks, Paulette. Our panelist Amanda is just having a little bit of a problem logging on, so hopefully she'll be able to join us soon. So Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Karen. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jonathan. I'm one of the senior traders here at Lumon, the currency specialist for this evening. So Lumon are international property currency specialists, specialising in moving money in and out of France, but also all over the world. So I've been here 14 of our 24 years of trading. Last year we were trusted with over £7 billion worth of currency in and out of countries all over the world, predominantly for property. So at this point in the webinars, we do like to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So you should see a poll launching on your screen now, just in terms of timescales. As some of you may be aware, the property transaction process in France doesn't happen overnight. You know, you don't just push a button and magically have a beautiful French property. There's a process to go through. So just in order for us to try and get as much relevant information for you based on those timescales, it is helpful for us to get some answers to those questions. So yes, just the timescales, whether it's perhaps this summer, the end of the year, or maybe next year, just for us to be able to give you some relevant information in that regard. So thank you very much, everyone who's responded there. I'm just going to close that poll and launch one more just in terms of the finance side of things. Certainly when we're talking about foreign exchange, the financial element's a very important part. As we say, the property transaction doesn't happen overnight. And Lumon actually have a number of different options to allow you to lock in currency at different stages in the process. You can get a lot of volatility in the currency markets, so being able to pinpoint an opportune moment to purchase your currency can save you a lot of money and also a lot of time and hassle if all of a sudden exchange rates are moving around a bit. So thank you very much everyone who's answered that poll, and I'm going to close that now and hand back to Karen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. So let's get started on these questions. Let's start with Joanna. There's a buying question here from Alan Kinsley, and he asks, what is the smartest way to be sure I will like the area or region I plan on moving to? Oh, you're muted still, Joe.
Okay, I'm back on. I had barking dogs, so I had to switch myself off. Right, well, the best way, obviously, is to go and visit the region. My best advice would always be to go and visit it in the winter, because if you love it in the winter, you're going to love it in the summer, even more so, because particularly if you're going to live there, there's a lot of touristy towns that might close down, or the restaurants close down and the bars close down in the winter months. And if you're going to be there all year round, you want to make sure that you're living in a place that's open, working, you know, people live and work there and everyday life goes on. So that would be the biggest tip. Budget affects France depending on where you are. You know, if you're on a small budget but you need a big property, then that narrows down where you can actually live. So areas like the Centre or the Limousin or areas like that are really, really good value for money. The Cruz being the cheapest, where you can buy a big 3-bedroom home for 63,000 euros, whereas 63,000 euros in Paris would get you a parking space. So there's a massive amount of difference to, you know, depending on your budget. So I'd write down a list of what you want, what the area has to offer. Are you looking at making money there, or are you just looking at, you know, having chickens and a vegetable patch? And narrow down the areas to your budget. And then if you can, do some recce trips. You know, go and spend the weekend there, speak to the locals, have a look at some properties, have a look at what your money can buy. And if you can't visit in the winter, then obviously go in the summer. But just ask around, you know, are you open? The other thing to take into consideration if it's a holiday home is transport links, because everything runs between April and September, but some airlines don't have flights every day, or they may just have one a week, or they may stop altogether in the winter months. So if you need to go backwards and forwards, again, that's another consideration. But France is massive. It's the biggest country in Western Europe, so there's plenty of choice everywhere, and there's properties to suit everyone's budget. And you know, if you ask any of our agents, they'll always say that they're living in the best area. So wherever you are in France, you'll be happy, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I'd like to, yeah, just reiterate that visit as often as you can and at different times of the year, and really get to know an area to make sure you like it. So now one for Jonathan, a currency question from Elizabeth Cutter. And she's asking, do I need a French bank account to buy euros? And presumably if she's buying euros, there's a chance she's buying a property. So there may be other reasons why she needs a French bank account too.
Sure. Okay, that's quite a common question we get early on in the process, because it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, I'm not just buying a few euros for traveling on holiday here. I've got to pay into a bank account potentially for a notaire, etc., etc. So yes, quite a common question. Good one to answer early on. So the short answer is actually no. You don't need to have a French bank account set up. In fact, it can be a little bit tricky in the very early stages to open a French bank account in some cases, and certainly we'll get this question perhaps also referred to Paulette, who can help with banking arrangements. But yes, typically you'll need at the very minimum to have signed the compromis de vente. That's the initial sales contract for purchasing a French property. In some cases, you might need to have completed the acte de vente and have an actual address there in France. A bit like in the UK and other places in the world, you need to sometimes have an actual base in that country to start looking at banking arrangements. So how Lumen can actually help with this: as soon as you register, and that's the first step, totally free of charge, you get instant access to a Euro, we call it a wallet, but it's basically a Euro client account. So very similar to a solicitor, accountants, other professionals who can hold client money. So we can hold client money in all the different currencies we trade. By the way, if any of our viewers are joining us from around the world, that would include if you had, say, Canadian dollars or American dollars, and you're looking to hold them and then buy euros, as well as, of course, people doing pounds to euros. So do you need a French bank account? No, you get instant access to this Euro wallet. There's some other benefits of the wallet as well versus a bank account, namely that we can pay direct to the notaire. This can save you a lot of time and hassle. As I say, ultimately you will want to get a French bank account a bit further down the line, but for the initial payments for the purchase, so the deposit, once the compromis de vente has been signed, and the acte de vente, the final payment, it's sometimes easier to get that paid from Lumon, from your Euro wallet, direct to the notaire. We know lots of the notaires in France. They've been sending us money. We've been sending them money for nearly 25 years. So they know our bank accounts, and it's really just a case of getting the email from the client with the bank details on. We've got a very specialist payments team. They sort everything out, and the euros magically appear there within 24 hours. So it's very easy for the client. If you had, say, 250,000 euros in a French bank, and then you're trying to get it to the notaire, bit like a larger amount of money in the UK in a British bank, trying to get it out and somewhere else, you might have to go in, you might have to book an appointment, there might be quite a few extra steps to take. If you're traveling out to France, with a dog in the back, just about to go and complete there, it might not be the easiest thing to do to then book a French banking appointment to try and get the money to the notaire. So yes, we can help with all of the payments. You will need a French bank account ultimately, but we can help with all the payments in the meantime.
And that's really good to know. It's one less thing to worry about when people are buying a property, and then once that's all settled, they can set up their bank account. Okay, so over to Tracy. We have a couple of questions that are very similar to each other. Charles Day, he wants to retire to France from the UK and wants to know how this is accomplished now we're out of the EU. And Adrienne Bennett says, what savings or salary do I need to move to France permanently?
Okay, yes, so that's two very good questions. And certainly retiring to France from the UK obviously is a completely different process to what it was before Brexit. And it's certainly one of the, I would say, a large proportion of our clients are either retirees or early retirees moving to France. So we help them, of course, with all of their visa requirements and paperwork. But I would certainly say, if you're wishing to retire to France, the first thing you want to think about is your long stay visitors visa, which is commonly known as a VLSTS. It's basically a non-working residency card, and it's a visa that you apply for from the UK, so from your UK or country of origin, if you're not British there. And the process takes about 2 to 3 months. And of course, as it's a non-working visa, you need to be able to meet the criteria for the financial side of things and the healthcare. Once you have your long stay visitors visa, the renewal is in France year after year. So it's just the first year that you apply from the UK. So this is a very common visa that we apply for many of our clients, and is completely doable. And the second part of your question was about savings and salary and meeting the earnings requirements, I think it was. So obviously one of the key criteria when you move into France is that you should not be a financial burden on France. And that's why you need to show sufficient revenue. Now, this could be pension revenue, it could be state or private pensions, it could be investment income, rental income, and it could be just savings as well. Also, do you own your property or are you renting your property? These are the types of things they will take into account with your file, and it's our job, of course, to put all of that together and make sure you meet the criteria and get your file ready and TLS ready, if you like, for your visa meeting. From an actual numbers perspective, if you're talking what you need to have, you would probably base it on the SMIC level, which is the lowest earnings. So you can't earn anything less than the SMIC level in France. It's currently at a net, it's about 1,400 euros. From a gross perspective, that works out to be about 1,750 euros. So that would be per adult. If you're a couple, they don't ask you to double it, but it's probably worked about 2,000 euros a month. So if you multiply that by 12, if you're a couple, then you have your yearly amount that you need to have as a revenue. When I'm working for my clients, of course, we put together all the different documents, and generally speaking, we want to make sure there is more than that hanging around. You don't want to be seen to be, you know, having £2.50 in your bank account or something like that. So a certain amount of savings and some revenue would be a good thing to have. From a salary perspective, well, again, if you move into France or with a visa, you wouldn't really have salary coming in if you move into France and not working. So that I'm not quite sure for the question, the salary side of it. So you can't come to France unless you have a working visa and get a salary, or unless you have a business visa, there you would get your, you know, your money from the business. So you wouldn't necessarily show your salary to come to France with, because they'd be saying, well, how are you going to work in France as a salaried person? So that would be shown with different types of documents. I hope that has answered both of those questions, but do reach out to book a meeting if you need support with either of those.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. We've got a couple of questions that relate to insurance for Paulette. Mandy Body has asked for health insurance estimated costs, please, which is a bit of how long is a piece of string, I think, but if you could advise on that. And Will Nuttycombe, which is a great name, has asked about health insurance and top-up insurance. How do you arrange these?
Okay, so yeah, as you say, that's a massive question, and it very much depends. Are you talking about insurance that you need to accompany your visa application, or once you're in France and you've got a social security number and you're looking at a mutual top-up? So I'll try and talk a little bit about both of them. So start with the visa application, because that's probably the first thing that people will come across. Depends on the country where you're applying for your visa, but if we talk about, you know, I presume most of the people watching the webinar are from the UK, so I'll talk more about the UK. And it very much also depends if you have pre-existing medical conditions. So generally, once you get to a certain age, you've got something that's a pre-existing medical condition. You know, most people will answer yes to something. If you do have kind of quite a major pre-existing medical condition, there's a policy that's like a fixed term. So it's for 12 months, but there's no medical questionnaire. So you think, oh, that's great. For that, you need a budget of about 1,500 euros per year per person. So that seems great. You know, there's no medical questionnaire, but it doesn't mean it covers the pre-existing medical conditions. It just means they don't ask you, so you're going to get the cover, so you can apply for your visa. It's not going to be refused. You know, you can apply for the cover. You know, go through with your visa, but it doesn't mean to say that you're covered. So you'll move to France, and those pre-existing conditions, even though they don't know what they are, there's a clause in there saying if you do have a pre-existing medical condition, it's excluded. But you've got your visa, and so you do need to try and, you know, make alternative arrangements if you do have a medical condition. Say you take tablets and things like that, to come with a, you know, a supply of those tablets and things like that. If we're then looking at, oh, just to say on that, there are types of policies where you can pay monthly, and that if you get your social security number in France, that you can apply for at 3 months. You're not going to get the number at 3 months, but you can apply after 3 months. That when you get the number, you can cancel that policy and convert it to a mutual. You know, Tracy can probably advise a bit more on that. It's probably going to take nearer the 12 months anyway to get your social security number. So Is there a difference between each? Not massively, but we'll go through that with all of our clients. We make sure that the right policy fits what basically your needs. Once you've got your social security number and you're living in France, that again, there's so many different levels of mutual. There's so many different things that you can put on a mutual. So if you want to increase optical, if you wear glasses, if you want to increase dental cover. So whilst I think there's about 8 different levels of mutual, each of those mutuals have 3 different things that you can add on, 1, 2 or 3 of them. I think it works out at over 80 different mutuals. So to give a guide price for that, difficult. But if we talk about kind of a good solid basic package, which is 100% of the base de remboursement with increased hospital care, you're probably looking at about €60 a month for a 60-year-old. But obviously it depends on your age, it depends what level of cover you want. What was the second part of the question? How do you apply? Really easy, just need basic information. And for mutual, there's no medical questionnaire, so that's easy. It doesn't matter if you've got any pre-existing conditions. For the visa insurance, again, it depends if you've got pre-existing medical conditions or not, whether there'll be a medical questionnaire or not, depending on the policy that you take. Generally, very easy to apply for, and we'll take you through. And
if they come to you, Paulette, you can advise them on all this. You'll help them through the process, so they don't need to worry about the questionnaire.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we try and do an appointment with anyone applying for that, because rather than just pick something off the shelf, here you go, that suits you. We'll try and have a conversation with the client, see what what their circumstances are, what the budget is, and fit it to their circumstances.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Paulette. So welcome to Amanda, who's been able to join us after technical difficulties. I'll just pass over to you, Amanda, now, and you can just quickly introduce yourself, as you missed that off at the beginning of the webinar. Oh, I think you're muted still. It should be under the audio setting. Shall we go to
about now?
Oh, no, great.
Great.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Do you know what? You're really glad you invited me. Thank you very much for your patience. They all say, some things are worth waiting for, so I hope I am. My name is Amanda Johnson. I live in the Loire Valley. I moved to France in 2006. And prior to being in France, I was in the UK and a fully qualified financial advisor. Moved to France, and then 2010 I started to work for the Spectrum IFA Group. Spectrum IFA Group started in 2003. We're all over Europe, and every country we're in, we are fully regulated. And what that means to you is that our advice is measured, and it means just as if you were in the UK, you would have something that was regulated by the Financial Services Authority. We're regulated here in France, so that gives our clients lots of comfort.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda. We've got some good financial questions for you coming up, so we'll get to those soon. So just before that, Sharon, we've got a couple of finance but mortgage type questions, which is Freddie Knight has asked, how is mortgage affordability calculated in France? And Yana Siemens says, what are the requirements to get a loan for buying a property in France, especially how much cash payment is required up front?
Okay, 2 very good questions. I think my question is, how long do we have? Because I could talk hours about this. So I will try and keep it simple, and if anybody wants to go into more detail, feel free to contact me. The basis of French mortgage lending is based on affordability. So we don't do income multiples, we do what we call debt to income ratio. So quite simply, the bank will look at the majority of banks will look at your net taxable income, although some may look at your gross income and some may look at your after-tax income, but most of the time it's your net taxable income, and they will look at your debt-related outgoings, including the new mortgage. So debt-related outgoings are your existing mortgage payments in the country where you live, if you pay rent, loans, credit cards, hire purchase agreements, and everything that kind of encompasses a financial commitment. And that includes the new French mortgage. So your debt-related outgoings must not be any more than 35% of your income. And that includes the new French mortgage with the life insurance requirement. So what we do is we calculate how that is. So the shorter the mortgage, the higher the monthly payment will be, the less you'll be able to borrow, the longer the mortgage, etc. So there's a little bit of flexibility into how much you can borrow by playing with durations of mortgage, etc. And that's where we as a broker come in. Where in the UK, if you're just simply on an income multiple, changing the duration of a mortgage doesn't have any impact on how much you can borrow. Deposit, so that's kind of the main basis of lending criteria. Afterwards, of course, there are so much other things that the banks look at, such as financial housekeeping, increase in your outgoings, whether, you know, how are you going to be able to afford a new mortgage, how many people are in your household, all sorts of things. But they also look at your savings and how much savings you will have left over after the purchase and how much deposit you'll be able to put down for the purchase. As a general rule of thumb, there are always exceptions. A non-resident buyer will be needing to be putting down between 10 and 30% of the property price and cover the purchase fees from their own savings. They also need to have savings left over afterwards, because if you're owning a second home in France, how are you going to pay, you know, for the emergencies that might happen? If you are buying your main property in France, i.e. you are moving to France, you've got your visa sorted out, you are a French resident, then there is less requirement in terms of deposit. French residents only need to cover the notary fees, although there are exceptions with some banks and they can finance the notary fees as well. So if you have become a French fiscal resident or you're actually moving to France, you have your visa, your carte de séjour, etc., and you have a settled aspect to your application, we can then, there are different mortgages available. So that's why I said I can talk about it forever, because there's so many different cases. So I hope I've answered your questions. I will try and keep it brief, so it's not the Sharon the Mortgage Show. So thank you for your questions.
That's great, Sharon. And one of the crucial differences, as you explained, is that French loans are based on your outgoings rather than just your salary. So that's very interesting. Okay, then let's get some of those financial questions over to Amanda. Andy Neem, he wants to know, what are the rules and rates for capital gains tax in France for expats selling assets or property? And he's asking for expats, but also, is that different to if you're a resident?
Yeah, so if you were, as soon as you have all your assets and your class as tax resident here, then it doesn't matter whether you're an expat or whether you're French or German, you know, we're all taxed the same. Okay, so that's the first thing. But let's say, for example, that he has moved across to France, and then let's say that he's had an ISA or he's had some shares in the UK and he hasn't moved those across when, you know, sorted out his affairs before coming here. Then when he wants to dispose of those shares, then he will have capital gains tax to pay here, and it's very likely that he'll have capital gains tax to pay in the UK as well. But I'm just going to concentrate on what there would be here in France, because like Sharon, it's all dependent on the person, and I don't want to go too much detail on that. So if you had assets prior to 2018, then what you could do was you could use how long you've held them, and then you could have a reduction. And then that all changed after 2018, where they brought in what they called sort of a flat rate. And in total, I'm just check my up to date. So it's a combined of 12.8% for the income tax. And then because everything in France is subject to social charges as well, then that would be 17.2%. So what's that, 30%? So what I try to do is, as soon as somebody decides that they want to come to and move to France, it's a really good idea. At the same time as they're talking to a leggett agent, or they're talking to one of Joanna's colleagues, is that they have a chat with a financial advisor to work out what is best to do and whether they're going to come here for long term, short term, and then work out, you know, which is best for them. When we start looking at and again, you're only going to pay capital gains tax if you've made a profit. Okay, I do stress that to people. If you've bought a house and it's your second home and then you want to sell it, then that depends on the length of time that you've owned it for. So in France, if you've owned it for 22 years, then there won't be any of the income tax side, which is a different rate. Okay, and then you'll get a reduction on the social charge. So again, everything is on a case by case, and then you're able to offset certain costs as well. But just to reiterate, the costs that you can offset, if it is a second home, it has to be, the easiest way I always think to explain to people is, if you've paid VAT on the work you've had done, then you're likely to be able to offset that. So if you've done the work yourself and with a friend, and you've bought the bits from Brico Depot or what have you, then it's very unlikely that you're going to be offset the cost of what you've spent. Whereas if you've had a local artisan and you pay TVA on the work being installed, then you're going to be able to use those bills to offset any capital gains tax.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Amanda. And as always, it's very important before you move to France to do your tax planning, to meet with an expert, so you are aware of what taxes you may or may be liable for, and
Absolutely.
how best to plan for
absolutely.
them.
So it's part of, you know, whether you're speaking to Tracy or Paulette or Sharon and Joanna and Jonathan, you know, we're a whole team that we all interact with each other, and we have a knock-on effect of what's right, and it can stop people getting into all sorts of pickles later on.
That's great. Thanks very much. Back to Joanna now with a buying question. Dan Harris says the DPE rating is important in our buying decision, and that's the energy efficiency certificate that sellers have to provide when they sell a property. And he says, is it a good measure for the ongoing energy costs?
Yes, definitely. I mean, over the last few years, obviously, we can't even advertise a property without having those reports in. So it's an independent diagnostic reporter who goes out and does these energy reports. The law's changed. If you're in the low end, like the FNGs, you actually have to have an expert go round and actually give a quote for what it's going to cost to bring it up to a D or a C. Also with F&Gs, you can't rent long term. So there's lots of things that, you know, France looks at with a DPE report. So if you're buying a property and it is very, very low, you'll be made aware of that. So you can either renegotiate the price of the property, although it is going to show it to you beforehand, because as I said, we can't advertise a property without the DPE report, so you're going to know sort of what level it's at. Now if you're buying sort of a small 1-bedroom tiny house, it's probably not going to cost a lot to get it up to standard. However, if you're buying a chateau, you know, and it's on a G, you just imagine, you know, even the roofs in those days weren't insulated, so it's going to cost an awful lot more. So the good thing is that every single property you see advertised online or in any magazines or anything will show you the energy report. If it's quite high, then you know it's going to be good, it's going to be low on your electricity, etc. But to get it to conform, you will get a report, particularly if it's low, to say what you will need to do. So whether that means putting glazed windows, or putting in a punctular, heating system, or taking out the wood burner and replacing it with pellets. All of those sorts of things will be advised to you before you buy. So you will have a very good idea of what it's going to cost to bring it up to standard.
Great. And actually the DPA report is very complex, not complex, but it goes into great detail, doesn't it? As you say, it does have the advice in there of what is needed to bring it up, and it is an accurate reflection of the property. So if it's a higher rating, your bills are going to be less, stating the obvious.
Exactly, and it has changed that now you do actually have to have a cost or an estimate, Debbie it's called, of what it is going to cost to bring it up from Regine.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks, Joanna. Over to Jonathan now. Dominic Johns says, what are the main benefits of using a currency broker? And I presume he means over a high street bank, for example.
For sure. Okay, yeah, happy to take that one on. So the main really headline reason to use a currency broker would be competitive rates of exchange. We can demonstrate savings against the high street banks and other banks out there. So just like buying holiday money, you want to get the best rate. It's going to mean your money goes further, not just for the purchase, but for your ongoing costs as well in the future. So yes, all to do with buying in bulk. So Lumen turned over about £7 billion worth of currency last year. So that gives us a really strong buying power in the market, and we have a lot more sort of control over the rates that we can offer clients. If you're talking about a typical bank, it won't be the person you speak to on the phone, or if you're doing it online, who sort of sets the rate. It'll be done at the head office. There's not going to be any really movement on that typically, and it's not always the most competitive deal in the market. A bit like with mortgages, loans, other sort of financial products, sometimes there's specialists in those types of areas who can get a better deal. So yes, that's one of the key reasons, headline reasons, is the exchange rate. I mentioned before the wallet, and that is very much a big part of the offering. So it's not just that you'd use that wallet to pay direct to the notaire, saving you a bit of time and hassle with managing that payment. You can also use the wallet to buy currency when it's a good time. So this can be really, really beneficial. I'll give you an example. We mentioned before about the compromis, the bonds being signed, and then the balance, typically the active bonds, that can sometimes be a good 2, maybe even 3 months later. Now, currency markets are moving all the time. Sometimes in a month, you can get a good few cents movement. The rate lately has been a little bit flatter. It hasn't been too volatile. We're looking at what we've got ahead for the rest of the year. You've got a US election, UK election, central banks cutting interest rates. There's lots of potential for volatility. So what you could do with this wallet, rather than just, if you were going to use the bank, you'd have to wait from doing the deposit, wait 3 months before you could buy your currency. That could be quite risky. The rates could have changed, could have obviously gone down, could be an embarrassing phone call to Jo or one of her team saying, help, I've got to transfer my money today, but the rates moved against me, and it's going to be a lot more expensive. So the wallets that we offer, you can actually use that to buy your currency when it's a particularly good day, or the rate might be moving against you. So you could lock in the rate, and that's going to protect you from any losses if the market continues to fall down. So it's just a bit more sort of peace of mind and certainty, really. You can lock in a rate when you want to, rather than being forced to buy currency on a particularly bad day or a bad week if you're going to use the banks. So just to recap there then, exchange rate, but also the wallet functionality. And then the final thing I'd add is just really service, someone to really talk you through everything that's going on in the currency markets, any potential changes that we might expect, forecasts. Also, our team are very experienced in dealing in the French property markets. We know the process for buying in France, the local banking customs, and just really ensure everything goes through smoothly.
That's great. And obviously currency can have a huge effect when you're buying a property abroad, from the day you sign the first contract to the day you sign the last contract. So having access to those best rates is obviously extremely important. So that's great. Okay, then Tracy, we have one which relates to visas and the 90-180 days rule, which you can hopefully explain a bit better. Jeanette Roman says, how can I stay all winter on the new rules? So I presume she means longer than the 3 months that you're allowed to stay.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's a lot of people obviously who don't want to become a permanent resident, but would like to have a little bit more flexibility because they have a second home, and therefore, you know, the 9180 just doesn't quite do it for them. So they want to have a little bit more flexibility on that. So in that case, with my clients, what I usually advise is a 6-month visa. And the 6-month visa allows them, obviously, the 6 in 12 months. So it allows them to have more time and they don't have to rush out of the country on the 90-day limit. So it may be, you know, that they might only want to stay for 4 months or 4.5 months in France, in which case the 6-month visa would work perfectly for them. It doesn't mean to say that you have to stay in France for 6 months from start to finish. It just means it builds in that flexibility so you can come to France, stay longer than the 90 days. So if you think you're going to want to spend more than 90 days in one go in France, the 6-month visa is definitely the solution to go for. It's a little less arduous than going for a permanent visa, of course. So the process is still from the UK or from your country of origin. And you don't have to have private healthcare insurance for that as well. So it does work out to be a little bit cheaper as well. It's renewable each year, of course, in the UK or country of origin. So it's not a visa that you can renew in France. It really is a tourist visa, 6-month maximum, that you renew every year in the UK. Okay.
Thanks, Tracy. So although visas is a large subject, it can be quite complicated. That was quite a simple answer. 6-month visa is the way to go. And good to know that people don't have to stay for the 6 months. They could go for 4 months or whatever.
And it's definitely flexible, yeah.
That's great. Okay, an insurance one now for Paulette. Mia Johnson says, I want to rent out my holiday home when I'm not using it. Will my house insurance still be valid?
So the easy answer is yes, but you must let your insurer know. Basically, what you need to make sure your property is covered for is like public liability insurance. You can also add, there's different types of policies, so we can either put a clause in the policy just to make sure you're covered for public liability insurance. I would stress always take a deposit from people staying, because if that person causes damage, you're going to be claiming off them and not your house insurance. House insurance in France is quite different to the UK, where it's multi-risks. In the UK, it's all risks, doesn't matter who caused the damage or what happened, you're covered. Whereas in France, it's multi-risk, and those multi-risks are fire, theft, climatic events, things like that. So you want to be making sure that you've taken that deposit from the client, and also to check that they've got public liability insurance themselves. Now, anybody who lives in France, their home insurance will automatically include that. So if you've got people staying in your property who've got a French home insurance, you know they're covered. People coming from outside of France, you need to make sure they've got, usually for British visitors, that they've got a travel insurance that will have that public liability insurance in it. You can, we can arrange a specific policy if you want to cover loss of income. So if you're relying on that income, we would say if you're relying on the income from a rental property, then we can do a separate policy that will cover, so they say if you have a fire or a flood and suddenly you lose all those bookings because you can't rent the property out, then that type of policy will kick in and will cover your loss of income. But just if you just want to put the clause on because you do a bit of Airbnb a couple of times a year, it won't cover the loss of income. But that's it. I'd say as a rule of thumb, it's about an extra €60 a year to rent out your, just have the public liability to rent out your property. It's really easy to arrange, but you must tell your insurer that you're renting your property out.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so as with anything, if anything changes at your property, you do need to inform your insurance company. You don't want to leave yourself not covered, so always tell them. Okay, lovely. One for Amanda now. Diane Weiss wants to know, is there an investment option similar to ISAs in France that she can take advantage of for tax efficient savings or investments? So anything similar to ISAs?
Okay, so yes, there is thankfully something similar, and I think the easiest way to describe it, and I'm going to try and do this really, really simply, is if you can imagine a wrapper, so a tax efficient wrapper that goes around something, and then so France has its version which is called an assurance vie. Okay, and the reason it's called an assurance vie is because it has a small element of life assurance, which is only sort of a maximum of 1%. But by having that, it means that in the event of your death, then and you're under the age of 70 when you take it out, it has some inheritance tax planning as well. But the main thing is that it can protect you. Earlier on we spoke about if somebody had got an ISA in the UK before they moved here, or they'd got some shares or something, what they can actually do is they can use one of these assurance fee wrappers, put whatever you want within reason, and it has to follow the rules, and somebody that wants to know more about that, I can go on a case-by-case basis. But basically it's a wrapper that goes around. They can put their money in it, and it can either be sterling, so if they've got pounds, we can do pounds, we can do euros, we can do Swiss francs, we can do dollars, because obviously lots of people move, don't they? So it might be that they come to France for a period of time, then they move somewhere else. And what it does, this wrapper protects the money from capital gains tax in France, and it covers protects it to some degree from income tax as well. So there's some really good things once you've had it for a period of 8 years. You also can receive an allowance for tax purposes on any withdrawals that you make from it. If you decide that you've been in France for 10 years and I don't know, you've got grandchildren or you've got ailing relatives and you decide that you want to go back to the UK, the ones that we offer are fully portable, so you can pick it up, take it with you. So yes, to answer that person's question, yes, there are things that are very, very similar, and depending on somebody's risk profile or what they want to do with their money, we've got one for everyone. And if they didn't want to do it with Spectrum, then they can go and speak to the local bank. You know, it's a generic product that is available from lots of different financial institutions, but obviously, you know, ours would probably be the best, but can't really say that.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. And the assurance fee, it's very popular with the French. A lot of the French use them. It is a very, as you say, it's sort of generic, it's a very popular investment savings strategy that they use. So yeah, lovely. Okay then. Sharon, a great mortgage question now. Stella Kane says, I have the cash, why would I buy with a mortgage?
Because you want to come and speak to me, that's why. So there are a couple of important points to consider. So obviously using leverage in your cash and keeping your cash for other purposes. One thing that we notice with foreign buyers is that they aren't necessarily aware that you can't just do equity release in France. If you buy a property cash, and say you put all of your money, your savings, etc., you develop the property, say in 2 or 3 years time or 10 years time, your financial situation may have completely changed. People come to us as mortgage brokers and say, right, we would like to raise a mortgage on our property. And I have to say, unfortunately, we can't do that in France. If you're developing a property, you're renovating it, and you run out of funds along the way, we can raise a renovation loan if you have quotes from artisans, etc. But we can't just raise money against the equity you have in the property. So bearing in mind that equity release isn't available for non-French fiscal residents, it's better to purchase with the mortgage, decide what your plans are, and chip away at the mortgage with lump sum overpayments, or look at the type of mortgage products that are available. We can factor in the wish that you kind of hope to be mortgage free quicker and provide you with a product that's more suitable than finding out in a couple of years' time that you actually can't get your cash out of the property unless you sell the property. That's devastating for people. The other reason, depending on your budget, could be quite simply to mitigate capital gains tax. So if you're at the upper end of the property and you're looking at those luxury villas in the south of France, or just a nice ski chalet or an apartment in Paris, you can quite easily fall into the capital gains tax, sorry, the wealth tax, I mean, not capital gains tax, the wealth tax element. And having a mortgage can help you mitigate that. So we can do things like interest only, we can do Lombard loans, we can do different ways of kind of helping you mitigate the tax element. But the main thing for most people is actually the fact that you can't do equity release, and it's very, very different here.
Okay, that's great. And right, and also when the rates are low, of course, you can keep your cash, put it into investment, that you're going to get a higher rate back. So that has been another strong reason in the past for going with a mortgage as well, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Joanna, over to you. I love this question from Julia Anderson. Obviously, there's been so much interest in chateaus over the past few years with a certain couple on the TV. Julia Anderson wants to know how to buy a castle. Is it any different to buying a house in France?
Well, the sales process is exactly the same. However, buying a castle will take a lot longer than it will buying an apartment, say in the Côte d'Azur. You do need to put a lot of time and effort into it and a lot of research. Because you've got to imagine, particularly if you're looking at the sort of thing that Dick and Angel did, in the Chateau, Escape to the Chateau, you know, they bought that very cheap, but they will have spent over $1 million on that. So it's not, you know, don't believe everything is going to be, oh, we're going to buy it for 200,000 and spend 150 on it. You know, you might get 2 rooms done for that amount of money. And you've got to remember as well that some of these chateaux are so old that they didn't have insulation in those days, so the heat just goes straight out of the ceiling. You know, the windows may need replacing, and that might not be, you know, 10 windows, that might be 123 windows. So there's lots of things that you really need to look at. I would always get somebody structural to come with you, which we don't normally recommend on farmhouses and things, because the French don't do surveys and the reports are very good. But on things like that sort of size, I would definitely do that. I would definitely get somebody to cost or give you an estimation of the works that may need doing. Unless it's been completely renovated and you can see that the DPE report is very strong and it's very good, then by all means, you know, the sales process, as I said, is no different whatsoever to buying an apartment or a house. It's just doing your due diligence and making sure that everything is in order, because they're big, and you know, you need to take a lot of time when buying a castle, and then looking at the area, you know, what's it got to offer, what you're going to use it for, the temperatures throughout the, you know, if you're in a very cold area, you're going to be looking at a lot of heating costs. If you're in a much warmer climate, you may only have to heat certain rooms depending on where you are. So yeah, I would just say it's just a matter of time when buying a castle, that you really take your time, get as many reports in as if it is, particularly if it needs renovation, because they could turn into money pits. They look fantastic on paper until you get the devies, which are the estimates coming in. However, saying that, we sell some amazing properties that have been renovated. You know, they're obviously a higher price. You're not going to get them because somebody probably has spent $1 million on them. But they're absolutely beautiful, stunning places to live. And you can buy anything. You can even build it these days for the price that we sell them for. You know, so they are a piece of history. You would be a custodian for the castle or the chateau. So wonderful places to live. And if it has been done, all the better. And it will still be a lot cheaper than any grand estate that you would get probably in the UK or anywhere that, for that matter, in the world.
Lovely, thanks, Joanna. I mean, who doesn't dream of living in a chateau? So the process is exactly the same, but there's a zillion other things to think about. I think we've got time for one last question. That hour has whizzed by. One for Jonathan. Patrick Weaver, he says, how do you get your pension pot over to France from England?
Okay, yeah, good questions. There's a number of different options there. So the first step, as always, in dealing with Lumen is to register, totally free of charge. You can set up the trading facility in a few minutes online or over the phone. And then we provide the client with sterling bank details. So I mentioned before about the wallets. You have the Euro wallet, you also have a sterling wallet, or any other currency that you're looking to trade. We'll get you those bank details. And then it's just a matter of being able to transfer the funds to us, and then looking at a time really to work on your transaction, It was mentioned earlier, I think, by Amanda about sort of attitudes to risk, and certainly that's a conversation that we can have. Some people may want to really try and squeeze out the best rate in the market by holding off. Of course, that comes with a bit of risk because rates could move against you. So we'll have that conversation. Others might be very careful about the rate that they're getting. They don't want to take any risk. By the way, that attitude and sort of analysis would apply with a property transaction as well. We'll have that conversation with the clients about what's going to suit them best. We do actually get a number of detailed forecasts from some of the leading banks out there. Sometimes we get clients, Googling in the middle of the night, where's the pound euro rate going? What's going to happen? You'll find all sorts of information on the internet, of course. We have very trusted, reliable data from about 50 different banks. You're not going to find this on a Google search or in the back of a newspaper. So very detailed information. Unfortunately, I won't tell you or anyone exactly what the market's going to do, because no one knows precisely where exchange rates or any kind of market will go. Of course, that's down to what's going on in the world. But the point is, we can give you some really detailed information to try and help you come to a decision. But in terms of the mechanics, very simple. You have that bank account to be able to transfer funds into. We can actually get euros into France within 24 hours, if not same day. There's no other additional fees, costs or charges. It's a straight transaction from pound to euro. I'll tell you exactly how many euros go into the bank account. For monthly payments, if you're looking at bringing, say, the monthly pension over, we have a number of options there where you can do sort of literally monthly payments. We call it a regular payment plan, where each day of the month you can have a standing order come in. We convert it on that day. And again, the euros are in France immediately. So yeah, a number of different ways we can manage your pensions and any other payments you'll be considering.
Lovely. So, for a crystal ball, eh? But the second best option, a currency specialist who has access to all the information to advise you. Well, that is nearly the hour up, so we'll draw it to a close. The next webinar will be on the 23rd of April, so hopefully you'll join us for that. If you want to register, you'll receive details after this. You'll also receive a recording of this webinar, which is really handy if you've missed anything or you want to listen to some of the answers again. Apologies to those whose questions we didn't answer. We had many more questions than we could answer in the time, but all our panelists' details are on the screen, so don't hesitate to get in touch with them. They'll be waiting to help you with any inquiries. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll just hand over to the panelists so they can say their farewells too. So bye from Joanna.
Yes, bye everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just to let you know, we do have these webinars monthly, which is good. So we might see you next month. We're also exhibiting at a Place in the Sun show in the beginning of May, which is in Excel in London. So hopefully if you've got any more questions, do come and talk to us on the stand if you're in the area. Thanks very much.
And Tracy?
Yes, great to answer all of your questions. Unfortunately, I won't be here in April, but do feel free to reach out. I want to leave with a word of advice is if you're serious about a move to France, you've got all of the panelists in front of you here today, all experts, but it really is about planning. It's about really taking the right advice. You wouldn't want to move to another country without getting that right advice, and you have the opportunity here in front of you, certainly when it comes to visas and paperwork. Then reach out. You can book a consultation with me where we answer all of your questions. I personally would take the time with you to go through your project and make sure that you have clarity on all of the next steps before you make your important decisions. So as I'm not going to be around next month, do take the time to reach out when you're ready.
Absolutely. And Sharon?
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. To Joanna and Jonathan for organising, to you, Karen, for hosting. I've had a lovely time talking about mortgages, so if anybody wants to talk about mortgages anymore, feel free to contact me. I'm sure there's lots we can discuss. But really, I would reiterate what Tracy has said. It's all about planning. It's exactly the same with mortgages. Don't come to me when you've found a property. Come to us when you start searching so that we can get you on the right budget. If there's anything we have to do to make sure that your file is improved or worked upon. We can do that if we plan ahead. So it's the same for everybody here. Planning is really key to the success of your purchase. So thank you all. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, and Paulette.
So thank you for listening, everybody, and same as everybody else, yeah, planning, get in touch with us when you're looking to, starting from when you're looking to apply for your visa. We can help you with the insurance to accompany that. We can open a bank account as soon as you've signed a compromis de vente. We can then insure the property once you've moved over. We can, insure your vehicles. We just go on and just basically hold your hand through the whole process, the whole journey. And biggest piece of advice is take the plunge. Do it.
That's great, absolutely. And Amanda?
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties, so thank you for your understanding and patience. Again, planning is everything, is key. And yeah, if you want to have a chat with myself or any of my colleagues, we offer, free consultation and free reports. But again, you do need to, you've got all the access to all these professionals, so please contact them because we can help and make it as smooth as possible for you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jonathan.
Well, a big thank you to you, Karen, for hosting so well. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you to all the panelists as well. It's been really informative. I hope our lovely audience has enjoyed it. And yeah, just like everyone said, do reach out to any of us individually. We're all experts in our relevant fields. And I guess from your point of view, it's just about getting as much information as possible. And we'll be delighted to have a chat with you. Good luck with your search. Thank you.
Lovely. So yes, once again, thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you found it very useful. There's been some really fascinating information in there. And we all hope to see you next time. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.